Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I'm Pascal Ravsou from the FHH, and I'm glad to have this great panel on watch creation taking place this afternoon at Watches and Wonders. I leave you without more weight in the expert hands of our moderator, Keith Strandberg from Revolution. Keith.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. I'm Keith Strandberg, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Revolution USA, a watch magazine. And one of my favorite topics is watch creation and watch design, because I don't understand much about it. And I think it's fascinating to get a look behind it from these fantastic gentlemen. I'll let them introduce themselves quickly before we get started into the questions, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end where you can ask some questions yourselves, okay? So when we start, Stéphane, if you would introduce yourself, please.
So, hello. Yeah. My name is Stéphane Belmont, and I'm in charge of the heritage for Jaeger-LeCoultre. And I've been working for the brand for 20 years in different positions, and among them in charge of product, marketing, also design and technical development. So I know quite well all the facets of creating and developing a mechanical watch.
Okay, thank you. And Fabrizio?
And I'm Fabrizio Buonamassa from Bvlgari. I joined the company 18 years ago, and I'm a former car designer, but I designed a lot of different things during my career: cars, motorbikes, watches, jewelry, and accessories. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you and talk about watch creation with these two gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess the only accent missing is the German one. So my name is Rudy Albers. I'm with Wempe Jewelers in New York. For the last 31 years, I had the pleasure of working for this international jeweler, ranking somewhere number 5 as a multi-brand jeweler. My father was a watchmaker, so I grew up under his bench and eventually decided to learn the craft myself. Applied for a job offer at Wempe, New York, and then I was very lucky because another handsome Italian man made her fall in love, and she moved into his castle in Italy, and I got her job. I moved into her office, and the rest is history.
Did you just call him a handsome Italian man? Starting to worry about his perception in general.
Actually, my wife is right here, front row.
Thank you very much. You're very kind, thanks. Okay, so one of the things that fascinates me about watch creation is how somebody like Fabrizio or somebody like Stéphane can come up with an idea that absolutely looks like the company they work for. You know, he designed something that's absolutely Bvlgari, or he designed something that's absolutely Jaeger-LeCoultre. So I want to understand how that happens. Stéphane, if you could explain that a little bit, is how you make sure that the design you come up with matches the brand you work for.
Well, first of all, you need to know quite well the brand you're working for. So a little bit the overall philosophy, the different codes that have been used in the past for the brand. So for Jaeger-LeCoultre, for instance, when we use numerals, they are Arabic numerals. Usually we use 4 or 12 numerals on the dials. We are making actually a very classic and refined watchmaking. So when it takes to designing a case, we do some simple, very clean lines for the case. In terms of dial, we are quite conservative, and we keep actually some white dials or silver dial. And actually the personality of the watch comes either from an iconic design. We have the chance to have the Reverso, which is a rectangular watch that swivel on itself, and that has a very strong design. So to create something within the Reverso is fairly easy because the Reverso is stronger than what you're going to put on the dial or inside the watch. So you first see the Reverso and then what's inside the Reverso. When it comes to round watches, which are more classic and might look a bit like all the other round watches, that's very much the technical content that will give the watch its personality. So when we create a complication, we will express the complication in a way that makes the watch look different from other watches. So that's starting with the complication, the function that will make actually the watch having a strong personality.
Okay.
So that's a little bit how we work at Jaeger-LeCoultre. And of course, to us, the most important is the future. So we always look at the past to know who we are, but we always try to develop the future. And maybe that's something that we're gonna come back on this, but it's important to always look at the present time and at the future in order to make those existing products evolving with the Jaeger-LeCoultre, and not just creating new lines all the time, but it's much more important for us to make the existing collection successful today and tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Fabrizio.
Well, I worked for a completely different brand. You know, Jaeger-LeCoultre is one of the most well-known brand in the watchmaking industry. They have an amazing product like Reverso, but even other products, very, very historical. From our point of view, the approach in terms of creativity is completely different. First of all, Bvlgari is one of the most iconic jewel maker in the world, that we able today to make even iconic timepieces. So the heritage that we have, it's completely different. Even because as a jewel maker, it's not just a matter of shape, but it's even a matter of materials. Another point, we are Italian, but it's not enough. We are Roman. It's the unique brand in the watchmaking industry, but in hard luxury that comes from Rome. This makes an amazing difference because for us, the light, the proportions, it's completely different. So we come from the heritage of the Roman kingdom. So when you spend time in Rome, you see the Colosseum, the Pantheon, Via dei Fori Imperiali, it's huge. And all these kind of things is an amazing impact on our creativity. We continue to introduce new ideas that have a very strong link with our heritage. We use our archive as an opportunity. We cannot find in a Bvlgari assortment, let me say, vintage product, because we continue to reinvent the brand through our iconic signs. This is the story behind the Serpenti watch. It's a signature for the brand. It's the most recognizable watch that we have. But for example, we have 9 or 10 different ways to wear a Serpenti watch today. So the roots in terms of design is the same, but we continue to reinvent the brand to our iconic signs. And this is the same for the Octo, for Bvlgari, and for Lucea. So in terms of creativity, our approach is unique. We'll continue to reinvent the brand, and my role as a creative director for the watches is to imagine the evolution of the brand through our iconic signs. It's true, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, keep going.
It's true that as a designer, as a creative director for a watch brand, you have to be able to know and to manage the heritage, the DNA, and the know-how of the brand, because otherwise you can make a lot of mistakes. So you have to very careful manage in a very careful way these kind of elements.
It's going to be a challenge for me to keep Fabrizio within his time.
Yeah, I can talk for years. It's
like the presidential debates. We should have a ding where he knows he's
No, please cut.
No, it's good. So Rudy, you meet with the brands when they come to see you, or you go to shows like this, or SHH, or so on. What sort of impact does a retailer, or can a retailer have on a design of a watch? How does that process work?
Well, being that we are on Fifth Avenue, just a few blocks from the Richemont headquarters and many other brands as well, we get frequent visits from the brand presidents, and oftentimes they have an entourage with them of designers and other important key personnel. And they have then the ability to talk to not just me, although I'm on the sales floor myself as well, which is a great advantage, so you somewhat know what's going on in the market, but to my sales staff. So they get first-hand feedback, and while this may not affect this year's collection, but in the future, hopefully, some cues will be taken. We also had the pleasure of being introduced to the Polaris collection from Jaeger-LeCoultre. You had a trip to New York with your team and the products before it went live, and key US retailers were asked to give feedback, and we had some information in terms of even the strap style to make the watch more sporty. There were a number of impacts there. And then Wempe in our headquarter level, we have 35 stores, so in Hamburg there are frequent visitors from Switzerland and Germany right now, and vice versa, where they probably have a much bigger impact than the local retailers, but with the 35 stores, you do get asked.
And do you actually listen when somebody like Rudy, or do you just go, oh yeah, sure, Rudy, we'll do that? Or is it important for you to get feedback from the people that are on the front lines of
Absolutely, it's key, and that's why we keep being close to our partners, close to our clients. That's the only way to further build the future of the brand and to develop the product, is to listen to you, to get your ideas and to bring them back to Switzerland, and actually to challenge our people with the ideas coming from the market. And that's a permanent back and forth from what comes from outside the company and what comes from inside the company. So we do listen very much and carefully to the market. Yeah.
But as the creative director of Bvlgari, for example, I'm sure you finish the design and then
this is the difference between a designer and an artist. So when you are an artist, you make an expression of your taste. If you like it, okay. If you don't like it, who cares? It's just for my ego. I have a piece of marble with my hammers and I make something that is my expression. If you are a designer, you have to sell something. So that's why the market is so important for us. Because you can make the best sketches if you want. First of all, the designer is not alone. You need a team behind you and beside you to transform a sketch in a real product. And the second thing is you have to sell it, because otherwise it's just for the stock. And the company doesn't like this kind of things because the stock is huge and the sales. So it's really important. We make meetings with our managing directors, with the people that are on the field, and we get comments. But if it's something that in the creative process you have to manage in a very careful way, because at the end of the process you have half and half. I love it and I hate it. What you want to do. It's the brand. So for sure we make sketches, we make prototypes, and we share with our salespeople. But at the end, it's the brand that have to decide if it's the watch, the product is right for the brand in this moment or not. So it's not. Sometimes it's not an easy decision. But for sure, the market it's very important for us.
So when a new watch is developed at Jaeger-LeCoultre, for example, what are the steps it goes through? If it's a completely new model, is it something that you listen to the market for what the demands are, or it's something that your team develops? What are the steps of actual watch creation?
Well, actually, it's when we do not create actually quite often a new collection, but we create new products within the existing collections. So sometimes when we create products from scratch, these are more the very complicated products. But actually the steps, it's first to know how we can further develop a collection, so to understand the spirit of the collection. And at Jaeger-LeCoultre, I think the products are are stronger than the brand. So each collection has its own character, its own personality, and our products are even better known than the brand. So actually, contrary to what Bvlgari does, where the brand actually is growing and the brand will influence every product, at Jaeger-LeCoultre it's more every collection has its own personality, and we need first to understand the context when the product was created. A reverso was created in the 1930s, so you need to dive back in the 1930s to understand why the reverso was created. Polaris was created in the 1960s, so you need to dive back in the context of the creation to understand why the Polaris was created, why it was one of the first modern watch, and then you can see how you can keep the spirit and adapt it to the modern time, to new, integrate new functions within the product, and of course look at the market and see how big the watch has to be, which colors are quite trendy, which material are popular right now. And eventually, I think you can convince salespeople that the watch is good if you come with something which is unexpected, with something that goes slightly above what the market expects, slightly above what the salespeople are expecting. And when you see that there's a sparkle in their eyes and there's something they didn't expect, then That's when usually we get the green light, because there's a little bit more than what the market actually expected from the product.
Great answer. Speaking of unexpected, maybe you can give us a little background
Not expected.
on the Finissimo,
Yeah.
the way that you guys went into the Finissimo. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
But the Finissimo was an idea. We started to develop the Finissimo more or less, if I remember well, 8 years ago. Thanks to the amazing skill that we have in our manufacturing site in Les Sentiers, today we are able to make this amazing product. And the first one was, if I remember well, was the manual tourbillon, the thinnest manual tourbillon in the world. So the idea was to develop a new way to wear a grand complication watch. When I say that Bvlgari is different, it's not to say because every brand is different. Each brand is different from the other. But when I say that we come from Italy, it means that today when you see Bvlgari Finissimo, you see an amazing know-how, an amazing skill that's come from Switzerland, and a very unique taste in terms of material, but in terms of design, in terms of way to wear this watch that come from Italy. So at the beginning, the idea was very simple, and I think that this is the most important things in terms of design, in terms of product. When you have a very strong idea, you don't need to make a maquillage. I say maquillage, it means you need to apply, you don't need to apply decorative elements. The luxury product is something that we can manage for just a short period of its life. It's something that we pass to someone. So the decorative elements becomes old, and the pure shapes and the pure idea, it's forever. So the idea behind Finissimo was to wear a grand complication watch, an ultra-thin watch in a contemporary way, in a cool way. After the tourbillon was the most iconic one, was the minute repeater. And this is a bit the story that you have behind the Italian design. So the story is, it's very simple. We have this movement. It's the thinnest minute repeater in the world, still today. And the idea is how can we improve the quality of the sound? Because the movement is very thin, the hammers are very small, and the thumb are very small. And I say, why don't you use titanium? Immediately the reaction was, no, it's impossible, because you know, Fabrizio, you come from Italy, but you know that in Switzerland, the minute repeater is the most important complication that you can find in the Swiss watchmaking heritage. We cannot use titanium. We have to use precious material like gold, white gold, rose gold. And I raise the hand again and say, yes, I understood, but again, I come from Italy, and I want to use titanium. So this is a really funny story, but it's the story that you have behind the Italian design rules. The titanium is, for me, the way to amplify the sounds. So, and I want to see that we talk about titanium, because if I make titanium with the same finishing of white gold, you cannot see the difference. So I say, I want to make a titanium case and have to be matte, completely matte finishing, because I have to tell you to the clients that this watch is different, starting from the movement, but even from an aesthetic point of view. So please make even the dial in titanium without indexes, and make the same finishing through the case and the dial. That's why today we have this watch, because after the minute repeater, we presented the thinnest automatic watch today on the market, and we have just one material with just one finishing for case, bracelet, and dial. So the constraints makes the opportunity often is the turning point of the project, and often in the Italian design drive the aesthetics. That's why, starting from the minute repeater, today you have the thinnest automatic movement in the world with this kind of design. This is part of the creative process. You know when you started and you never know when you finish. So this is the alchemy, this is the mystery of the creative process. It's unbelievable.
Very good. From a retailer standpoint, do collectors know what they want when they're coming in looking for a watch, or can they give you feedback on what you should say to the brand about what watch to develop next, or do they only know it when they see it?
Well, people have ideas, and people have, not demands, but they have vision, and they share with us by the time it goes all the way to the manufacturer. There's also obviously another portion to this, which is just because they like it, is there a majority worldwide that would allow a production of this watch? You know, or is it just a one-off? You know, there's smaller companies that can do the one-offs, but on the big groups, and you know, we have a lot of stores, so in order to make this possible, you have to have a lot of different watches to be created. So most people have like an idea, they're drawn to a brand because they've seen their marketing efforts, and then they come to a store like ours and they want to try and compare. But most importantly, it's really the design that speaks to them. Okay. Because you know, the watch is no longer the main provider of precise time. We're all surrounded by time with our iPhones. So therefore, it becomes really a little piece of jewelry that we like to look at and enjoy. And if that doesn't feel right, you know, you can have the greatest name on the dial. If the design is not there, it's very difficult to make that a success.
Okay. What are the levels of approval like in Bvlgari? Do a lot of people have to say yes, or is it?
No. It's a small company, so we are.
I love the smile, right?
We are very fast. So I was surprised because when I say before, I'm a former car designer. So when I joined Bvlgari, I was surprised because to make a watch, you need exactly the same time that you need to make a car.
Really?
Really. Sometimes 5 years, 6 years. For the Grand Complication movement, you know when you start, you never know when you finish. But it's, for Bvlgari, I worked directly with Jean-Christophe Babin and with Guido Terreni, the managing director of the watches business unit. So the process is very fast. Sometimes, I'm honest, for the design process, for the beginning, from scratch, for the white piece of paper to the collection, in terms of design, in terms of creativity, we can spend 2 weeks or 3 years. It depends. Sometimes you have the idea like this, sometimes the idea never comes.
Okay.
Because you cannot manage the creativity. But when you have the idea, we are very fast. And in terms of creative process, we discuss directly with Jean-Christophe, so it's not so. And immediately after, we show the idea to the customers, and we start to develop the creativity with the marketing team and with different markets.
And what about you, Stéphane?
Well, actually, it's first you need to convince people who are working within the manufacturer, so our own people, and they will be the first filter. They will first tell you if it's a Jaeger-LeCoultre watch or not. And I think if you need first to go through all the people who are working on the watch. So you need to convince the designers, but also the watchmakers, the people who will make the finishings and so on. And you need first to get the approval from within before going and showing the product outside the company, and starting with our partners and so on that have a great experience and that will tell us if it's a product, first if it's a real Jaeger-LeCoultre, but also if it's a product that is actually made for the market today. So it's something that also takes time, and as it's the same. You never know how long it's going to take to make a watch. The most difficult is not to make a highly complicated watch, because there you know that if you put a lot of functions, it will be always impressive. I think the most important is to design a watch that is appealing. And to design a watch, actually the most difficult would be to design a woman's watch, because then you never know. It's going to be either they're going to love it or they're going to hate it, but there's no way you can convince a woman that a watch is a good watch. Whereas for a man, you can talk about the technical content, talk about history, and make him then feel he has to buy a watch. But for a woman, it's first the design, and then if she likes the design, then you can start going a little bit more in depth. But otherwise, there's no way. So that's why. When we designed we've got two very successful ladies' watches, the Reverso on one hand, because it has a little surprise on the back, and that's a very feminine actually approach. And we're lucky to have been able to design the Rendezvous collection that we launched 7 years ago. And it's a round watch, automatic, fully different from the Reverso, quite complementary. But actually, it's today the second best-selling collection of the brand. And it took us more than 10 years to dare actually showing the watch to our partners. And that was a very long process until our people also approved the design, approved the functions, and that we actually could launch the watch. So to us, the feminine watch is the most challenging, but when it works, it can be quite a huge success on the long run.
Now, from a retail side, Rudy, why is it that sometimes a great product isn't successful right away? We were talking earlier about the Royal Oak and how the Royal Oak wasn't necessarily a very big success when it started, but now it's an icon in the industry.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. I remember distinctly standing in front of Wempe before I started working there. Some watchmaker colleagues looking at the Royal Oak in the window. We all scratched our heads. We're like, this watch doesn't do anything for us, you know. And today I happen to like the watch a great deal, although unfortunately I don't carry it anymore. That's another story. But you know, they stuck with it, and I guess over time, you know, they formed an icon, just like the Reverso, and you know, you're doing pretty well there too. That this might happen over time, and if we all knew which one would be the icon, we would probably buy a few and put them in a drawer, but we just never know.
Well, you guys, you have the Octo as an icon, you have the Reverso as an icon. Were those set out to be made into an icon, or did they just become an icon?
But I think they become an icon with time, and that's only the time that will actually define which products actually are becoming icons. The debate that we usually have is, do iconic products are just design products, or can we have also mechanical functions, like for instance the memo box? Is it also an iconic function? The alarm movement of Jaeger-LeCoultre. Is gyro tourbillon in terms of tourbillon going to become an icon? So that's a bit the question. Today we think icon much more define a design rather than a function. But that's something that I'd like to hear a bit what you think about icon, design, and techniques.
Just the market can tell you if your product is an iconic product or not. You can feel, but at the end, just the market can tell you after many years. So, for example, you can make, first of all, your product have to be innovative. Mm-hmm. You have to make a sort of innovation. It could be the movement, it could be an aesthetic innovation, it could be a different way to use common materials. But just the market can tell you, just the clients can tell you, because otherwise you don't have just one receipt. It's a mix. For sure, your watch have to be innovative, have to be often. You have the right product, not in the right moment. So you have to wait. Many sketches that we have, many creativity that we have. I'll tell you that we have some watches that where we presented this year was designed 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I say, we have to make this watch, we have to do it. It's not the right moment. So sometimes you have to wait. Because if you are too innovative, if you change the material, if you change the way to read the time, if you change the movement, if you change the where to wear the watch, the clients often are not ready. They are scared about many, many novelties. So often you have to very balance this kind of innovations. Right. For sure, the movement, the technical parts is very important, because otherwise you get a product without no soul. It's just aesthetics. And even for the Italians, that we are crazy for the aesthetic, first of all, a product has to work. Immediately after, it has to be beautiful. Because if it's just a beautiful product, it's like a statue, it's like a sculpture. You put on your desk and that's it. But again, a designer loves to make things and products that someone has to use it. Our mission, it's crazy, these kind of things, but it's true. It's to improve the quality of life of our clients through the product that we design every day. This is our mission. If we touch an object that you feel that is different, for us it's enough. Imagine that we wear a watch like this, that it's a new bracelet and a new buckle with a new movement, with a new aesthetics. At the beginning it was not so easy, because as a designer, when you make a product, you already have in your mind. But when you have to sell the products in the company to your internal client, you have to imagine that they saw the picture for the first time. And often the reaction is, what is this? But for you, it's something already old that you know very well. So you start to explain. But coming back for your question, it's you don't have just one receipt. For sure, the product has to be innovative, and for sure the product have to represent the brand very, very well.
Right.
Because otherwise the clients say, yes, it's beautiful, but it's not for me.
It's not a Bvlgari, yes. Okay. There are lots of constraints with watch design, though. You know, it has to do its
I
job.
love constraints.
Right? You love
I
constraints.
love constraints.
Tell me how much you love constraints.
I love constraints because otherwise our job is just to make beautiful sketches and drawings on the paper.
Yeah.
This is the most interesting things, to find a way to solve the problems, technical problems in terms of technology, in terms of after-sales service, because you know, nobody cares, but when you make sketches, often you have the people that come from the after-sales. Fabrizio, please tell me how can I fit the dial inside the case when I have to remove? Let's say, I don't know, but you know, our product doesn't break, so you don't have this job. No, but I'm joking, but it's true. We love to play, I love to play with constraints. No, it's true that doesn't break. Yes, even this is true. But I love to play with constraints, is the most exciting things.
Yeah, absolutely. Constraints are what drives actually the creativity, what makes people also willing to do better, willing to advance. And if you have no constraints, there's no challenge, and people get bored by their job. So I fully agree when you set some challenge to make a very thin watch. For instance, we've got the thinnest minute repeater with tourbillon automatic.
We will see.
Actually, it's already on the market.
Now we will see the future.
And our people thought it was impossible to make a ground complication half the size of the regular ground complication. But that's how actually now they're proud because they managed to do that. And I think constraints, that's what drives actually the creativity and what makes our watches every year a bit better. And today we feel that our role is to create actually the 21st century watchmaking. And for that, it's not just design, it's also to make watches where you can fully enjoy the mechanical watches without having to read the instruction booklet, without having to care about after sales, because you know the watch will last long enough and servicing will be easy. So that's something where you should get rid of all the don't do that, don't adjust the perpetual calendar between this time and this time, don't adjust the time backwards, don't do this and don't do that. And today the watches, the mechanical watches have to become much smarter inside so that they are much user-friendly, much, actually you can fully enjoy the design, enjoy the mechanical watchmaking without having any constraints. So it should be easy to set. And that's what we also, we've been working on for the last 15 years, so since the turn of the 21st century, is to fully reinvent the mechanical watchmaking using modern technology, using new materials, using much more complex mechanisms, but that are easier to use. And that's how we think people will carry on enjoying beautiful watches if they can just enjoy the watch and not having to care about the way it works, or actually to read the instruction booklet every time they want to put the watch on their wrist.
Interesting.
I can actually attest to that because we have a full-fledged service department, and the number of problems that make it to my desks are minimal these days, which wasn't the case in the past. But I think all the manufacturers realize that they will also be measured by their service time, not just by how fast the watches sell, but also how fast they come back after the service and how well the service is performed. And I had just the pleasure of going to the RTC in Dallas, where you see what kind of investment has been placed in order to ensure the service for the watches in the long run. And it's very impressive, so it's heading in the right direction.
There's a big trend in vintage and heritage kind of watches, and there's been some criticism that it's a lazy way of designing. How would you respond to that? And it's not coming from me, let's just say that.
I fully agree, so that's why we
Me
actually...
either. I'm sorry.
So that's why actually we were always quite reluctant to take back watches from the past and reactivate them. So of course we did that in different ways. 20 years ago when I joined the company, we were depending very much on the reverso. That was maybe 3/4 of our sales. And since then we managed to quite balance our portfolio by launching new products, So we started, before launching the Polaris that we just mentioned, we started to launch almost 15 years ago the master compressor, which was also inspired from the dial and so on, from the Polaris, but reinterpreted in a more modern way. So it was quite a surprise for the market because nobody expected Jaeger-LeCoultre to do a sports watch.
Right.
And it took actually quite a while internally but also externally to explain that Jaeger-LeCoultre also had an history in making sport watches, diving watches, military watches, pilot watches. So that was part of what was Jaeger-LeCoultre, and with that we could reactivate that. But it's always a challenge when you come with something which is not expected, and that people actually feel like they don't understand. So sometimes it's much easier to stick to the real product, to make a real Polaris, a Polaris that looks pretty much the same than the original one, rather than trying to reinterpret the product. So it's easy, but it works with men. I think for women it's a little bit difficult. Again, I think women expect something new, and they are not as influenced by the vintage than men.
Okay. Fabrizio, I'd like to hear your opinion.
Vintage for Bulgari doesn't exist, honestly.
Except for the Serpenti, I guess.
Yeah, no, but even for Serpenti, we don't have a vintage approach. It's we are not able to do it, honestly. In terms of creativity, we cannot. We make some sketches on the wall, say, wow, it's fantastic, and the day after, you say, well, throw out because that doesn't make sense with the brand, honestly. Our first watch was a ladies' watch, and this was made 100 years ago. But we don't use, again, our archive as an opportunity. I agree with you, often it's lazy designers, but it's even true that it's very difficult each time to make new things. Yeah. And sometimes it's true, you have beautiful objects, and why don't you can make a new edition? But it's even a marketing point of view, because the vintage product, in the marketing point of view, makes a very emotional links with, for example, your father or your grandfather watch. So you see the watch in the windows and say, I remember this watch, my father wore this watch when I was a kid, I want it.
Yes.
But now you are getting the copy, it's not the real watch.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity in terms of marketing. I agree with you in terms of creativity, honestly, it's not our way to imagine the future of the brand. But you have some brand that is so deep in terms of heritage that can make for many, many years the same watch. And in terms of design, wow, I love it. So imagine you have to make each time the same watch. Sometimes could be a jail in terms of creativity.
Right. Yes.
But
I think the best is to have a product from the past that has never stopped, so
yes,
that you don't have to reinvent it. But as the reverse, so it's always been around, so it's a vintage product. But since it's never stopped, it's not a re-edition, or it's not a new vintage. And that maybe these are probably the best product, the one that will last long enough so that they are vintage, but they are still of today.
the story of Serpenti, I'm sorry, is the same.
Yes, that's true.
We started in 1947.
And it's still going.
With the Jaeger-LeCoultre movement.
We'll continue. Yes, with Jaeger-LeCoultre movement, with the Audemars Piguet movements. No, with many movements. At those times, Bulgari makes an amazing piece of jewelry and asks for different watch brands to make the movement. So it's.
So was the success the movement or the design?
For the design, for sure. It's come on. The design was so incredible. The movement was a common round-shaped movement. So
the movement was so small that it was hard to
no, you have an amazing movement, honestly. You have an amazing movement. I dream to use your movement, the thinnest one. It could be an amazing Serpenti watch.
How long do you think this vintage trend will last from the retail side?
Well, we have actually, I mean, from like bringing old designs back.
Yes.
Well, the market will decide.
Okay.
You know, I think there are a lot of people today that wear, you know, Apple watches, which I'm always happy when somebody at least wears something on the wrist. There's hope for the future. And they discover vintage. And at some point, and oftentimes it's also not just from design perspective, but also from a financial aspect. Right. But as they mature, they're sometimes interested in getting a brand new watch, making the first scratch themselves. And so, hard to say. Right now, everybody's jumping in it, but the future will show.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. If anybody has some questions, you're going to need to, I think, speak up because I don't know we have a mic for.
I have a question actually regarding design, manufacture, and cost.
Okay.
If you take the same model watch, if you have the same model watch that's manufactured in stainless titanium, and then manufacture the exact same watch in rose gold, white gold, etc., what is it that accounts for the huge cost differential? Because it clearly isn't just the cost of the material. We know what gold costs per ounce, etc. Yet if you make the same model watch in gold versus stainless, there can be a $15,000 or more differential.
Okay,
in
thank
cost.
you for coming. We're just going to.
It's something that I've always wondered. This is a good forum to ask that question.
For sure, the cost of the material is the cost of the titanium is completely different from the cost of the rose gold or white gold.
But that doesn't account for the
But
whole.
even when you make the same watch in steel and the same watch in titanium, you have to completely change the tools that works in the machine. Because if you use the same tool that works on the steel to the titanium, you destroy immediately the machine, and you cannot use the same tool for the titanium to make a steel case, because you make a small portion of titanium in the steel case. So it's a completely different way to produce a watch. It's a completely different way to imagine the watch, because you have some things that some shapes, for example, some details that you can make in titanium, you cannot make in ceramic, you cannot make in steel, you cannot make in gold, because the gold is softer than titanium, that's 3 times harder than steel. So it's, I'll tell you, this watch, it's 3 different projects. The titanium one, the steel one, and the rose gold one. 3 different projects. So we already know the design of the case, the bracelet, and the dial. It's 3 completely different ways to produce it, in terms of thickness of the material and finishing.
Is it a matter of man hours that it takes to manufacture the watch? Just it can't be just the material itself. Obviously, I know you're talking about the
It's
design.
because we are too small and we're using the same machine to produce the titanium and the gold and the steel. That means if we wanted to avoid that, we should produce many more watches and dedicate the machines that will produce the gold the whole year round or the steel all the whole year round, and then you can avoid actually what you're mentioning. But since we are actually working on the same machine, we need every time to change everything, to clean the machine, change the tools, and that's what's explained actually the price difference. And also quantities are much smaller when you produce precious material rather than steel watches. Yeah.
But even if you don't use the same machine, just to tell you that you need 1 year, 1 year and a half to develop the same watch that you already know in a different material. So you have to imagine that sometimes you have 4, 5, 10 people that work for 1 year to develop the gold version. Because you have to remove the gold from the bracelet, but the bracelet it becomes too thin, so when you put the pin inside, and you put on the wrist, just with this movement, the buckle, it's change the shape, and it's you cannot fit on the wrist. So sometimes you have people that works for years just to change the material. This was the case of the Finissimo in carbon. We redesigned completely the watch. And we spent 2 years to develop just the carbon bracelet.
Good answers. Well
Thank you
done.
very much.
Wow. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sure you all are very good friends. When it comes to innovation of your ideas, whether it's with materials, with the functions, with the aesthetics, how do you protect yourself from your friendly competitors?
Yes, for sure. We work like this.
Actually, nobody will copy a reversal, so that's something that is around. So we can show all our project with the reversals. Nobody actually can copy the reversal. So actually, when you stick to who you are, to actually your philosophy, to the identity of the product, actually, you do things that are just your own things and not something that could be from another brand. So when we do a gyro tourbillon, it can be only Jaeger-LeCoultre that does the gyro tourbillon. The same for a Memovox. We can show all our designs for Memovox. You need the Memovox to create actually then the design around the watch. So I think it's a way to know who you are what's the identity of your product, and really do something that is according to your brand. And then you don't have to protect yourself, because actually you're just doing something that is good for Jaeger-LeCoultre but might not work at all for another brand.
Okay, good answer.
You have a lot of copy of Serpenti on the market, honestly. You cannot protect the watch. You try to protect, and after 1 year you have another can copy your idea. When I was at the university, design university, I have some colleagues that works in this way, make sketches and look around if someone copy. And the teacher say, hey guys, if someone copy you, it's a good sign. If nobody copy you, you have to make some problem maybe. So when someone copy our products, I'm very happy, because first of all, I'm not in a legal office. So, and the second one, it's a good sign, because it's true. Everybody try to copy the Reverso, a lot of copy of Serpenti, a lot of copy of iconic watches. This is another part of the first receipt. If someone copy you, you are on the good way.
Okay, good. There's a guy in the back. He's got.
So I was just wondering, can you just kind of touch upon how you effectively utilize the information that you gather, not only from your sales force, but also from your clients alike, when projects are so time intensive, right? So in the fashion world, there are 2 collections. You have spring, summer, then fall, winter. And so whether you're on the design side or the buy side, it's extremely easy to pivot because you have, you know, things happen so quickly. How do you do that in the world of watchmaking when things take 5, 10, 15 years to develop?
Good question.
I honestly, I don't understand. I didn't catch
You want to say, sorry, do you want to say it again? They didn't hear because of the plane.
Yeah, so my background is working in the fashion world.
Okay.
So what I was saying is that in the fashion world, you have 2 collections. You have spring, summer, and fall, winter. And so whether you're on the design side or the buy side, it's extremely easy to pivot when you're receiving feedback. How do you effectively kind of pivot during the design process when projects are so time intensive, when things take 5, 10, 15 years? How do you use that information to kind of change the project?
That's a good question.
You know, when you work on a long-term project do an ultra-thin watch, for instance, that's something that takes years, as you mentioned. And so you're going to first focus on the main challenge, which will be to make actually the technical part of the development, and then the aesthetics will come later. So when the project advances, you'll have time at the end to adapt actually to the trend, to adapt, to select the materials that you're going to use for the case, to select the colors of the dials and so on. That's something that doesn't take as long as the development. So you first need to have an overall objective, to set something, to have something you know it's going to make, it's going to be new, it's going to surprise the world. And then at the end you can adapt the colors, the material to the current trends. So that's how we work. We don't actually define everything from the very beginning of the project.
Ah, interesting. Fabrizio, same?
It's the fashion industry is 100 times faster than watchmaking industry, honestly. We receive comments, we start to imagine the collection, and we start to develop the collection. Sometimes it's possible to change when you receive some comments, sometimes it's not possible, because you have to imagine that we start to plan investment for years. When we start to imagine a collection, that will be in gold, in steel, in titanium. Again, you have to get the materials. Just to make a dial, sometimes you make 6 months, 8 months to development just to find the right colors. So it's honestly not often, sometimes it's not possible to change. But we try to anticipate these kind of things, and we try to make several options, several designs, and we try to develop many references at the same time.
Good answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, just one quick question. I know we're almost out of time, and I want to thank you all for obviously answering all the questions. My question to you is, looking back historically in, let's say, 70s and early 80s with the whole quartz revolution or quartz crisis, if you want to call it, could you potentially predict something similar happening with a modern wearable technology? Because millennials are really into a technology more so, and they don't really necessarily appreciate the quality of Swiss or timepiece manufacturing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. So I think there's a room for the iWatch for, workout and in certain situations. But, it's like everybody looks the same. Aesthetically, it's not that exciting. So after a while, I think you're all longing for something that just is more of an expression of your personality. How much jewelry can a man wear? This is really something that is specifically that you select, that reflects you. And we see a lot of young people, partially with parents that get introduced, they hand down watches, and the love continues. But it's a concern. But I don't think that the smartwatches will kill the watch business.
Do you guys have anything to say?
I think, anyway, people are looking, when they buy a smartwatch, they might buy the functional part of the watch. When they come to buy actually a mechanical watch, they want something that will last, not for just a few years, but for a few generations. So we know that technology is not meant to last because it evolves much too fast. And we know that even the smartest watch will be totally outdated after a few months. So I think that these are two different worlds. One is more a design, something where you buy a design, you buy something that will last long, and you buy something where there's a real value. And on the other side, so it's much more emotional, and on the other side, it's pure function. And you're going to change the watch just after a few months or years.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming. It was a pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen. Very pleasurable.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Great job. Really great. Good job. That was a lot of fun. Good work.